The first thing to get clear about Christian morality between man and man is that in this department, Christ did not come to preach any brand new morality. The golden rule of the New Testament, do as you would be done by, is a summing up of what everyone at bottom had always known to be right. Really great moral teachers never do introduce new moralities. It is quacks and cranks who do that. As Dr. Johnson said, people need to be reminded more often than they need to be instructed. The real job of every moral teacher is to keep on bringing us back, time after time, to the old simple principles which we are all so anxious not to see, like bringing a horse back and back to the fence it has refused to jump, or bringing a child back and back to the bit in its lesson that it wants to shirk. The second thing to get clear is that Christianity has not and does not profess to have a detailed political program for applying do as you would be done by to a particular society at a particular moment. It could not have. It is meant for all men at all times, and the particular program which suited one place or time would not suit another. And anyhow, that is not how Christianity works. When it tells you to feed the hungry, it does not give you lessons in cookery. When it tells you to read the scriptures, it does not give you lessons in Hebrew and Greek, or even in English grammar. It was never intended to replace or supersede the ordinary human arts and sciences. It is rather a director which will set them all to the right jobs, and a source of energy which will give them all new life, if only they will put themselves at its disposal. People say, the church ought to give us a lead. That is true if they mean it in the right way, but false if they mean it in the wrong way. By the church, they ought to mean the whole body of practicing Christians. And when they say that the church should give us a lead, they ought to mean that some Christians, those who happen to have the right talents, should be economists and statesmen, and that all economists and statesmen should be Christians, and that their whole efforts in politics and economics should be directed to putting do as you would be done by into action. If that happened, and if we others were really ready to take it, then we should find the Christian solution for our own social problems pretty quickly. But of course, when they ask for a lead from the church, most people mean they want the clergy to put out a political program. That is silly. The clergy are those particular people within the whole church who have been specially trained and set aside to look after what concerns us as creatures who are going to live forever. And we are asking them to do a quite different job for which they have not been trained. The job is really on us, on the layman. The application of Christian principles, say, to trade unionism or education, must come from Christian trade unionists and Christian schoolmasters, just as Christian literature comes from Christian novelists and dramatists, not from the bench of bishops getting together and trying to write plays and novels in their spare time. All the same, the New Testament, without going into details, gives us a pretty clear hint of what a fully Christian society would be like. Perhaps it gives us more than we can take. It tells us that there are to be no passengers or parasites. If man does not work, he ought not to eat. Everyone is to work with his own hands. And what is more, everyone's work is to produce something good. There will be no manufacture of silly luxuries and then of sillier advertisements to persuade us to buy them. And there is to be no swank or side, no putting on airs. To that extent, a Christian society would be what we now call leftist. On the other hand, it is always insisting on obedience obedience, and outward marks of respect from all of us to properly appointed magistrates, from children to parents, and, I am afraid this is going to be very unpopular, from wives to husbands. Thirdly, it is to be a cheerful society, full of singing and rejoicing, and regarding worry or anxiety as wrong. Courtesy is one of the Christian virtues, and the New Testament hates what it calls busybodies. If there was such a society in existence, and you or I visited it, I think we should come away with a curious impression. We should feel that its economic life was very socialistic and, in that sense, advanced, but that its family life and its code of manners were rather old-fashioned, perhaps even ceremonious and aristocratic. Each of us would like some bits of it, but I am afraid very few of us would like the whole thing. That is just what one would expect if Christianity is the total plan for the human machine. We have all departed from that total plan in different ways, and each of us wants to make out that his own modification of the original plan is the plan itself. You will find this again and again about anything that is really Christian. Everyone is attracted by bits of it and wants to pick out those bits and leave the rest. That is why we do not get much further. And that is why people who are fighting for quite opposite things can both say they are fighting for Christianity. Now, another point. There's one bit of advice given to us by the ancient heathen Greeks and by the Jews in the Old Testament and by the great Christian teachers of the Middle Ages, which the modern economic system has completely disobeyed. All these people told us not to lend money at interest, and lending money at interest, what we call investment, is the basis of our whole system. Now, it may not absolutely follow that we are wrong. Some people say that when Moses and Aristotle and the Christians agreed in forbidding interest, or usury as they called it, they could not foresee the joint stock company and were only dunking of the private moneylender, and that therefore we need not bother about what they said. That is a question I can not decide on. I am not an economist, and I simply do not know whether the investment system is responsible for the state we are in or not. This is where we want the Christian economist. But I should not have been honest if I had not told you that 3 great civilizations had agreed, or so it seems at first sight, in condemning the very thing on which we have based our whole life. One more point, and I am done. In the passage where the New Testament says that everyone must work, it gives us a reason in order that he may have something to give to those in need. Charity giving to the poor is an essential part of Christian morality. In the frightening parable of the sheep and the goats, it seems to be the point on which everything turns. Some people nowadays say that charity ought to be unnecessary, and that instead of giving to the poor, we ought to be producing a society in which there were no poor to give to. They may be quite right in saying that we ought to produce that kind of society. But if anyone thinks that, as a consequence, you can stop giving in the meantime, then he has parted company with all Christian morality. I do not believe one can settle how much we ought to give. I am afraid the only safe rule is to give more than we can spare. In other words, if our expenditure on comforts, luxuries, amusements, etc., is up to the standard common among those with the same income as our own, we are probably giving away too little. If our charities do not at all pinch or hamper us, I should say they are too small. There ought to be things we should like to do and cannot do because our charitable expenditure excludes them. I'm speaking now of charities in the common way. Particular cases of distress among your own relatives, friends, neighbors, or employees, which God, as it were, forces upon your notice, may demand much more, even to the crippling and endangering of your own position. For many of us, the great obstacle to charity lies not in our luxurious living or desire for more money, but in our fear of insecurity. This must often be recognized as a temptation. Sometimes our pride also hinders our charity. We are tempted to spend more than we ought on the showy forms of generosity, tipping, hospitality, and less than we ought on those who really need our help. And now, before I end, I am going to venture on a guess as to how this section has affected any who have read it. My guess is that there are some leftist people among them who are very angry that it has not gone further in that direction, and some people of an opposite sort who are angry because they think it has gone much too far. If so, that brings us right up against the real snag in all this drawing up of blueprints for a Christian society. Most of us are not really approaching the subject in order to find out what Christianity says. We are approaching it in the hope of finding support from Christianity for the views of our own party. We are looking for an ally where we are offered either a master or a judge. I am just the same. There are bits in this section that I wanted to leave out, and that is why nothing whatever is going to come of such talks unless we go a much longer way round. A Christian society is not going to arrive until most of us really want it, and we are not going to want it until we become fully Christian. I may repeat, do as you would be done by, till I am black in the face, but I cannot really carry it out till I love my neighbor as myself. And I cannot learn to love my neighbor as myself till I learn to love God. And I cannot learn to love God except by learning to obey him. And so, as I warned you, we are driven on to something more inward, driven on from social matters to religious matters. For the longest way round is the shortest way home.
In the tapestry of life, it's often the quiet moments that herald the greatest changes. C.S. Lewis, a profound thinker and storyteller, believed that God doesn't always call to us in the thunder, but whispers in the gentle breeze of our everyday experiences. As we embark on this exploration, let us seek the subtle signs that suggest God is about to change our story. Through the lens of Lewis's insights, we will uncover how these quiet awakenings can lead to profound transformations in our journey with the divine. In the midst of life's relentless march, where days meld into one another under the guise of routine, there lies a hidden invitation to awakening. It is not amidst the clamor of grand revelations that most of us find our turning points, but rather in the quiet corners of our existence, where the mundane meets the mystical. Lewis, with his characteristic blend of wit and wisdom, might suggest that God often chooses the whisper over the whirlwind to capture our attention, to stir the depths of our souls. Consider the gentle nudge of a persistent thought, the recurring echo of a dream not yet fully understood, or the quiet discontent that whispers of realms beyond our grasp. These are not mere figments of our imagination, but are, perhaps, the first threads of a divine tapestry being woven into the fabric of our lives. Lewis would likely argue that our most profound awakenings often arise from the simplest of moments. A sunrise that stirs an unspoken yearning, a line from a book that echoes long in our thoughts, or a conversation that leaves our spirit restless for something more. Awakening, in the Lewisian sense, is the dawning realization that the world we see is but a shadow of a more substantial reality that beckons us. It is the initial stirring of the heart that hints at our role in a grander narrative, a story authored by God Himself. This awakening does not shout from the rooftops, but instead whispers in the silence of our being, inviting us to embark on a journey of discovery and transformation. As we heed these subtle signs, we begin to see our lives not as a series of random events, but as a carefully orchestrated symphony composed by the divine maestro. Each note, each rest, plays a crucial part in the unfolding melody of our existence. The nature of this awakening is not a sudden enlightenment, but a gradual unveiling, where the scales fall from our eyes, and we are invited to see the world, ourselves, and our God in a new light. In embracing these quiet awakenings, we open ourselves to the possibility of change, to the divine plot twists that God weaves into our stories. For it is often in the gentle whisper of God's voice that we find the courage to let go of our old selves and step into the new roles He has written for us in His grand, cosmic play. C.S. Lewis once remarked, "Hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny." It's a poignant reminder that our trials, though fraught with discomfort, are not mere obstacles, but crucibles for growth and change. In the shadow of suffering, we find not only the harshness of life, but also the potential for divine transformation. Lewis understood suffering as a megaphone that God uses to rouse a deaf world. It's in our moments of pain and adversity that we are often most receptive to change, most aware of our own fragility, and most open to seeking something beyond ourselves. This receptivity can become the fertile ground from which a new chapter of our story, penned by God, begins to emerge. Consider the biblical story of Joseph, who endured betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment, only to rise to a position where he could save nations from famine. His trials were not mere episodes of misfortune, but integral parts of a larger narrative that God was writing. Like Joseph, we may find that our deepest struggles are not detours, but essential pathways to the destiny God has for us. In facing our challenges, we are invited not to despair, but to persevere with the understanding that our current trials may be the very tools God uses to shape us into the characters we need to become for the next scene in our life story. It is through our suffering that we often gain the wisdom, strength, and empathy necessary to embrace the roles God has designed for us. Suffering, then, can be seen as a sign that God is actively working in our lives, pruning us to bear more fruit, as a gardener tends to his plants. The pain of the pruning process is real, but so is the growth that follows. By embracing our hardships with faith and courage, we allow God to transform our trials into triumphs, our pain into purpose. C.S. Lewis famously posited, "If I find in myself desires which nothing in this world can satisfy, the only logical explanation is that I was made for another world." This profound insight lays the foundation for our third topic, the recognition of our deep, unfulfilled longings as signs that we are destined for something greater, something beyond the mere physical realm. Lewis believed that our most profound desires, those that material pleasures cannot quench, are not merely whims of the human condition, but echoes of our true home calling to us. These unmet desires, these whispers of something more, serve as indicators that our stories are meant to transcend the confines of this world, pointing towards an eternal narrative crafted by the divine. When we experience moments of unexplained yearning, when beauty, love, or a sense of wonder stir within us an insatiable hunger, we are feeling the pull of eternity on our hearts. These are not moments to be dismissed as fleeting emotions, but to be acknowledged as signs of our participation in a larger, divine story. This longing for more is a beacon, guiding us through the fog of routine and the ephemeral, towards the shores of a deeper spiritual truth. It invites us to explore the possibility that the restlessness we feel is a divine discontent, planted within us to lead us back to God, the source of all fulfillment. In our journey with God, these echoes of eternity are calls to action, urging us to seek out our place in God's grand narrative. They remind us that we are not merely players on a worldly stage, but eternal souls fashioned for an everlasting kingdom. As we attune our hearts to these divine whispers, we open ourselves to the transformative work God wishes to do in and through us. We begin to see our lives not as a series of unconnected events, but as a pilgrimage towards a divine horizon, where every longing finds its fulfillment, and every desire points us back to our Creator. C.S. Lewis had a knack for recognizing the divine in the ordinary, often suggesting that what we perceive as mere coincidences are, in fact, the quiet workings of God in our lives. He famously quipped, "Coincidences are God's way of remaining anonymous," hinting at the subtle manner in which the divine orchestration unfolds around us. This topic delves into the concept of providence and happy coincidences, exploring how these unexpected encounters and seemingly random events might actually be signposts that God is actively involved in our narrative, gently steering us toward His intended plot twists. Consider the serendipitous meetings that alter the course of our lives, the unforeseen opportunities that arise just when we need them, or the inexplicable timing of events that, in hindsight, fit together too perfectly to be mere chance. These moments, often overlooked or dismissed as luck, may very well be the brushstrokes of God on the canvas of our existence. Lewis would argue that these coincidences are not random at all, but are imbued with purpose, meticulously woven into the fabric of our lives by a loving Creator. They serve as reminders that our stories are not solitary tales, but part of a grand, interconnected narrative, where every character, every event, plays a role in the unfolding divine drama. In recognizing these divine fingerprints in our lives, we're invited to look beyond the surface, to perceive the deeper connections and the guiding hand of God in our journey. This perspective encourages us to trust in the flow of our lives, to remain open to the unexpected, and to find comfort in the knowledge that, even in the chaos, there is a hidden order, a divine plot that we are part of. By embracing the providential nature of these happy coincidences, we allow ourselves to be more attuned to the possibilities that God lays before us, to be more willing to follow the leads He provides, and to be more aware of the continuous dialogue between our desires and His will. Drawing upon the deep well of C.S. Lewis's thought, our fifth topic explores the transformative power of trust in God, especially during times of uncertainty and change. Lewis often spoke of faith as a journey through shadowed valleys and sunlit peaks, with trust in God serving as our guiding light. In the midst of life's tumult, a profound peace can envelop us, a quietude that defies the chaos of our circumstances. This peace, Lewis might argue, is a tangible sign of God's presence and a reminder of His promise to lead us through the storms. It's in the stillness of our hearts, in the quiet trust in God's sovereignty, that we often find the strength to endure and the courage to embrace the unfolding chapters of our story. This tranquility is not born from an absence of trouble, but from an abiding confidence in the One who holds our days in His hands. It's a peace that, as Lewis would say, passes all understanding, a serene assurance that, no matter how the plot twists, the author of our faith is with us, guiding each step. Embracing this quietude of trust involves surrendering our need for control, releasing our grip on the pen with which we try to write our own stories. It means finding rest in the knowledge that, though we may not understand each turn of the page, there is a purpose in every line, a reason for every pause. In this posture of trust, we open ourselves to the transformative work God desires to do within us. We allow Him to pen His will in our lives, leading us not only to a place of peace amidst the storm, but also to a deeper relationship with Him. It's here, in the quietude of trust, that we are truly prepared for the changes God is weaving into our narrative. In the spirit of C.S. Lewis, we've journeyed through the landscapes of awakening, suffering, longing, providence, and trust, each path revealing signs that God is at work, reshaping our story. Lewis, with his profound understanding of the human and divine narrative, reminds us that our lives are not mere collections of random events, but integral chapters in a grander story authored by God. As we reflect on the signs of God's transformative work in our lives, the quiet awakenings, the purpose within suffering, the unquenchable longings, the serendipitous encounters, and the peace that comes from trust, we are invited to see ourselves as characters in a divine play, with roles to play and lines to speak, that contribute to the unfolding of God's great narrative. This journey of discovery does not end here. It continues each day, with every heartbeat and breath, as we live out the story God is writing for us. We are called not just to be passive observers, but active participants, co-creators with God, in the ongoing creation of our lives and the world around us. Let us then embrace our part in this grand narrative with courage and hope, trusting in the author who knows the end from the beginning. May we be attentive to the subtle signs of his guidance, open to the transformative power of his pen, and ready to step into the new chapters he is crafting for us. In the words of Lewis, there are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind. As we move forward, may we carry this assurance in our hearts, looking to the future with anticipation for the wondrous story God continues to write in and through us.